Oh, mamma mia! I'm playing that old arcade game. It's just like the 80s, back when I was super famous, and I was saving the princess, and from the Bowser, and everybody loved the Mario. Now nobody loves the Mario. Everybody loves the Link and Legend of Zelda. It's all about the Breath of the Wild. What about the Mario? What about my Odyssey? What about my adventures? Doesn't the princess love me anymore? No more. It's a time. It's a time for Mario of the Wild. I got it. You found me. It's me, a Korok Mario. Woohoo! Hey, FeralInferno back, and today we're talking about the 2017 Game of the Year. 2017 had two really big heavy hitters in it. We don't typically see Mario and Zelda come out with big titles in the same year, let alone a console launch year. Very rarely you see something this big, but the Switch was able to get that. And so, yeah, today we're talking about Super Mario Odyssey and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Wow, and these are two really, really special games, and crazy that these two have to go head to head. They could easily win a Game of the Year in most years. So first, what we're going to talk about, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and what an awesome experience this game was. Thinking back of when this came out, it was March 3rd, 2017. I went to a midnight launch for it. So technically on March 2nd, I was in line waiting for it, and wanted to make sure I was like one of the first people in line. I think I was maybe second, I can't remember, but got the special edition. Special edition was really cool, and yeah, I was probably up until that first night, probably till like 5 a.m. Playing it, trying to experience everything I could with Breath of the Wild. And it's even the opening area was just a lot of fun, and it definitely was what the Zelda series needed. It needed an infusion of innovation and breaking some of the norms that had gone on in Zelda for just so many years. And I remember just playing Skyward Sword, the game that came before Breath of the Wild, and be like, a lot of this is starting to become a little bit stale. So Breath of the Wild was really a breath of fresh air for the series. What really stood out from Breath of the Wild was just how open and vast the world was, how you could go everywhere, how seamless the world was. It wasn't like, hey, you have to go to another area and have a loading screen. Everything was connected. It did have some frame rate issues. Being such a large game on new hardware made sense. That made sense, and they did make some improvements to that. But really great open world game with Zelda, and really the Great Plateau is the opening area, and even that seems super large, just from an exploration standpoint for an opening area. And it was nice, though, they kind of gave you a little bit of taste of everything before they threw you right into Hyrule, into the vast open world of Hyrule. But yeah, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, really excellent adventure. Really sucked me in. I spent almost 400 hours on this between the main adventure, finding all 900 Korok seeds, and the DLC. Haven't revisited since. I spent nearly a full year playing it. I remember playing it, I think, right up until Christmas of 2017. A little bit off and on throughout the year, trying to play a few other things as well. But still just kind of going back and having fun in the world after you've gotten everything was nice. But yeah, it's one of the best worlds I've ever been a part of in a video game. It really sucks you in. It's really immersive. And if you haven't played it, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but you gotta play Breath of the Wild. You gotta play it, especially if you got a Switch or even a Wii U. It came out on the Wii U. It was a dual release, which was really great. I love it when they do that. Transitioning from one console to the next, because the people in the Wii U, this was supposed to be a Wii U game originally, and it became a Wii U and Switch game, and that would have been really awful for the Wii U fans not to get this. Obviously, I picked it up for the Switch, but I imagine for the people on the Wii U, they did have some advantage with that, with the Wii U tablet having 2 screens for your map and your item management. That's one really nice thing about Zelda games on the Wii U. But yeah, Breath of the Wild, you'll really get immersed in the world. Easy to get lost. And a lot of times people will say that as a bad thing. With Breath of the Wild, getting lost is a big part of the fun. Just trying to see what's behind that rock, what's behind that tree, what secret's here. Could there be a Korok in this weird rock or tree formation? It'll suck you in. Make sure you have lots of free time available. Because it's going to be something that's going to be a long adventure for you. I mean, you could try to rush through it, and I've heard a lot of people do that, and it is designed to play it how you want. You go almost anywhere you want after you get off the Great Plateau kind of tutorial area. That's another thing about Breath of the Wild that was so great, was a lot of Zelda games have really long tutorials, really hand-holdy. Not Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild just throws you into a tutorial world and lets you figure out most of the things on your own. Its predecessor, Skyward Sword, it was one of the things I really didn't like about Skyward Sword. Same with Twilight Princess. I want to get out of the town. I don't want to spend my first half hour and a half in a town trying to learn how to fish or how to chase a cat. Let me go figure the game out on my own. I'm not a toddler. So I understand why Nintendo does that, but at least make it optional, or do what they did here. Really excellent game design decision by doing that with Zelda Breath of the Wild. You could, like I said, there's a lot to do in this world. A lot of it's optional. You don't have to do everything. You can go right to Ganon very early on if you've got the cojones to do it. But me personally, I did almost everything before I went to Ganon. And like I said, I got all 900 Korok seeds. You got all the upgrades, everything you could do in the game before the DLC came out anyways. The DLC was okay. The second part of the DLC was better than the first part because it added an extra dungeon. And that gets us into some of the cons of Breath of the Wild. We gushed a lot about what was great about it. But what was not so great about it was the lack of dungeons. There are 4 main dungeons, 1 DLC dungeon, and they're barely dungeons. You can very loosely call them a dungeon. They're called the Divine Beasts, and they're interesting. They got some interesting mechanics to them, but it's not the large immersive dungeon. That's one sacrifice that was made with Breath of the Wild. They do make up for it with a whole bunch of what they call shrines, kind of like little mini dungeons that you could find on the map, and they all have like little puzzles to them, which was really cool. If they had the shrines mixed with real Zelda dungeons, this would be a tough game to say, find a better game than this. But because of that lack of dungeons, that really hurt the game for a lot of fans. Speaking of dungeons, a lot of nice things about dungeons is you'll find a lot of different variety of enemies in dungeons. And while this game does have some cool enemies like the Lionels and the Moblins, some really interesting combat, especially the Lionels and the Guardians. The Guardian characters are fairly new. They're a lot of fun to fight. So what enemies are here are fun to fight and figure out how to defeat them the best way possible. However, there's not a lot of variety of enemies. They do the RPG thing where you have a different color for a lot of different enemies. But not a big variety of enemies. We're missing some Stelphos. We're missing a lot of different classic Zelda enemies. But yeah, Zelda Breath of the Wild, excellent game. One other little con, pro and con, I would call it, is the sound design. Sound design is excellent, don't get me wrong. It's very atmospheric. You have a lot of great noises to take in, whether it's the grass blowing in the wind, or some birds flying overhead, or your footsteps, or the rain. It's the thunder and lightning in the background, or a volcano going off, and if you're up in the mountains. A lot of cool stuff with the audio going on with Zelda Breath of the Wild. However, the tunes aren't there. Your classic Zelda melodies. They didn't have to be the classic melodies. It could be new ones, but they're not there. There's a lot of times the game's very quiet. I was kind of expecting maybe after you get off the Great Plateau, you get a little bit more music. You don't. The music is a little bit of a letdown, but at the same time, the sound design works for the game, so it's hard to call it a con or a pro. It's kind of a neutral position, I guess, to take on it. But a little more music would have been nice. But yeah, Zelda Breath of the Wild, one of the games that's nominated for 2017 Game of the Year by FeralInferno. And what a heavy hitter that Breath of the Wild has to go up against here. Zelda a lot of times playing second fiddle to Mario, and we're going to talk about Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey, again, was a refreshing new take on the Mario series. A lot of cool mechanics with it, with Mario being able to use Cappy, his hat, to take over enemies, and kind of you can become a Goomba, you can become a Koopa Troopa, you can become Yoshi, you can become almost any character in the game that you can take over. A Bullet Bill, you can be a Bullet Bill with his. You throw your hat, and as you saw from our skit, you just toss the hat and you take control of that enemy. So really cool. A lot of variety of gameplay. It goes back to the more Mario 64, a little bit of Mario Sunshine style levels, where you have a little bit of a hub that you do with your ship, and you can go to different parts of the world. I guess a planet, you could say, and go to these your ice world, you got your fire world, you got your desert world, which is kind of cool. Your classic, forest level, and your more green plainsy level, your Bowser type level, your castle level. So a lot of great locations. This felt like a really good, almost like a sequel to Mario 64. Like if Mario Sunshine felt very different from Mario 64 because of the flood mechanic. It was so different. And then after Mario Sunshine, we had the Mario Galaxy series, which were great, but not, it was different. You were walking in these little planetoids rather than going through these big, vast worlds. But this brings the big, vast worlds back. They're much larger than what you had in Mario 64. And what a grand adventure. I spent 100 hours on a Mario game. That to me is just so insane. There's so much to do, a lot of things to collect, a lot of outfits that you can buy for Mario with your purple coins and other ways to get them. But yeah, it was a really cool game. I really enjoyed it. Really good return to form for Mario. Even there's a city level, and it's not something I wasn't sure how I'd like the city level. Mario is more fantasy, and this had this more like kind of New York City almost recreations called New Donk City. But they did a really nice job with it, even though New Donk City is actually probably the worst level in the game, but it's still a lot of fun because there's a lot to do in it, but not a lot of enemies to really face off on. So it's a little bit of a different experience going to New Donk City, but it's okay. They did a really nice job with all the levels in this game. Where does Mario Odyssey though let us down? Mario Odyssey lets us down in terms of what we just talked about with Zelda Breath of the Wild, doing a 180 from its predecessors with the tutorials. Mario Odyssey does have some tutorials in it. They're not all really horrible, but it's kind of the mini tutorials you get throughout the game. And it might have been because I was playing without Rumble on, because I don't personally like Rumble. I like Rumble in a few games, but very rarely do I like using rumble. I feel like it's annoying. You know, you hear a motor going off in your controller, and for me, it actually breaks the immersion. I don't know it's supposed to bring you into it. The only game I ever found rumble to be fun with was Star Fox, because hearing that noise made sense because you're in an airship, and so you hear things rattle around and you hear that rumbling motor go. That made sense, and that actually immersed me in the game. And I liked using the rumble pack for Star Fox, not other games, but there's some few spots in the game where I guess your controller might rumble and you're supposed to ground pound, but you can kind of see, like, you know, like it might be a little bit of a lump in the ground or something, you know, to ground pound it. You know, just like in any other the 3D Mario games, you see something in the ground, you think, hey, maybe I ground pound this. Every time I'd run over one where you're supposed to ground pound and there's a secret there, a little tutorial goes in the corner of the screen showing you a little video of Mario doing a ground pound and what controls to use to do it. I'm like, get out of here. I don't need you to tell me that. I want to figure this out on my own. So the hand-holding there was ridiculous. I did not like that. That should not have been there. It's fine that you want to include that as an option, you know, for your kids or people who want their handheld. I don't want my handheld. I grew up in the NES era. I grew up with Atari games and Nintendo games from the 8-bit era. I don't want you holding my hand. I want to get my butt kicked. I want to get mad at the game. And I want to figure out my own because that's very satisfying. But for a game to tell you where the secret is, like, what's the point of putting a secret there if you're going to tell me where it is? That was a very big sticking point with Mario Odyssey for me. You know, Zelda had a lot of little cons. Mario Odyssey, that for me was a very, very large con for the game. But yeah, beyond that, it was pretty good. New Donk City was a cool level, but that was a little bit of a letdown too. But there's a lot to do in Mario Odyssey as well. Mario Odyssey, you can really kind of plow through if you don't want to get everything. Mario Odyssey, you can just go through and get, you know, finish the levels, get the bare minimum, and get to where you need to go in terms of finding your moons, because you're collecting moons in this one. But me, I wanted to collect all the moons, find all the outfits, all the purple coins. If you want to do that stuff, Mario Odyssey's got a lot of content for you. Not as much as Zelda Breath of the Wild, but it definitely delivers really, really well. Probably the longest Mario game that I've ever played. You know, that's saying something with there's a lot of different Mario RPG games out there, and this trumped them in terms of gameplay time. So now the moment of truth comes on, and we got to say, hey, who's going to win the battle? Are we going to give it to Zelda Breath of the Wild, or are we going to go Super Mario Odyssey? Well, a little bit of a tough decision, but at the end of the day, I got to go with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like I talked about before, really immersive. I remember just getting sucked into the game, and where I couldn't put it down. And, you know, you forget that you have real world responsibilities even with this game. I remember there was a few cases where I was driving one day. I was driving to the store, and I was stopped I was getting off the off ramp there, and off the expressway, and I saw some trees, and I immediately, like, a part of me, like, almost got, like, unbuckled my seatbelt, got out of the car, and wanted to start climbing the tree. And it's like, oh, I want to see is there anything up there in that tree? Like, can I see, you know, from a distance from that tree? It was really a surreal moment. I was like, oh, wow, I might need to slow down Breath of the Wild. I didn't. I kept going, and I remember having dinner with a friend. We went out to a diner. I still remember this. This was just, like, you know, from some family diner or whatever, having dinner. And, you know, we're having dinner, and we're waiting for dinner actually to come to us. We've already ordered. And I'm looking around the restaurant. I'm always checking out my surroundings. If you watch my videos, you'll see me, like, turning my head around all the time. I can't keep my head still. You know, I'm Italian. I'm allowed, right? But anyways, we're in the restaurant, and I see these, like, they're fake plants, but there's, like, these three shrubs sitting there, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a pattern. There might be a Korok there. I'm gonna go to a Korok seed. I got up out of my seat, and I was like, what am I doing? I've never really been like that with video games. Like, I've always known there was you know, a line, game reality. The line started to blur. I mean, I was putting a lot of hours. I remember when the Switch first came out, I didn't realize that you could see gameplay time. And I hadn't hung out with my friends too much the first 2 weeks Breath of the Wild came out. And because the first 10 days you have a game, it doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you what your gameplay time is. It just says like you started this game 9 days ago, 8 days ago, whatever. But after the 10th day, it'll tell you how many hours you put in. Well, one of my buddies came over. I did a Smash Bros night, and he said, "Hey, are you okay? You still got your job? You know, are you doing all right?" I'm like, "Yeah. Why? Why do you ask?" He kind of like set me aside. He's like, "Well, I saw you're on my friend list on the Switch, and you know, I saw how many hours you put into Breath of the Wild." I was like, "What?" I was like, "You can see that?" And he's like, "Yeah." And so I turned it on real quick to see what he was talking about, and I was like, "Oh, wow!" And I had put like I think like 80 something hours into Breath of the Wild in 2 weeks, and or 10 days, anyways. And I was like, "Yeah, I've just not been sleeping much." But yeah, I don't think I could do that again. I'm getting a little older now, so. But yeah, Breath of the Wild, awesome game. Really love it, and it really deserves the 2017 Game of the Year. It's one of the best games ever made. It definitely could have been easily, you know, it might still be maybe the greatest game of all time. But if it didn't have some of the downfalls that it has, especially when you look at the lack of dungeons, Zelda dungeons, and the variety of enemies being just a little bit lackluster, you know, that really hurts it. Along with, you know, there's a weapon mechanic in the game where the weapons break on you, which I'm okay with. I wouldn't think I would be, but I'm okay with it. But some of the weapons shouldn't break. I won't say which weapons, but there's some weapons that do break. You're like, oh, that weapon really shouldn't break. That should be a okay weapon to not have to worry about breaking. And not only that, the weapons break too easily, too soon. Some of the Lionel fights, you have to go through several weapons, especially the harder Lionels. You know, it's hard to get through them with one weapon. You know, and having that weapon, you know, not breaking. I mean, you'll get some really good weapons from the Lionel. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it gets a little annoying having to keep swapping out weapons. So that would have been nice, even if you have a repair option, or just to have a little more durability for the weapons. But yeah, I don't want to crap too much on Zelda Breath of the Wild, because there's so much to celebrate. But if you're afraid of an open world game, I wouldn't say I was afraid of it, but I was a little cautious. I wasn't sure how I was going to like it. I was cautiously optimistic with Zelda Breath of the Wild, because I really was concerned that I wasn't going to like an open world game, because I never really played one. They never really appealed to me. You know, I looked into some MMOs and things like that, and that's just not my style game. But Zelda did it right. You know, I looked into things like Skyrim and other games. They just weren't for me. Breath of the Wild, though, they did a fantastic job crafting an excellent world that you'll want to get lost in time and time again. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining us today. Really enjoyed talking about Zelda Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey with you, and we'll be looking forward to doing 2016 Game of the Year next in about a month. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode. All right, take care.